Remember when we were kids trying to copy our favorite athletes? You'd run around the backyard thinking you were Ronaldo or Jordan, even though you had zero stamina and your slippers were making that embarrassing flap flap sound behind you. Same here. And if you're anything like me, almost every athlete you looked up to had that swoosh on their chest. Nike wasn't just a brand, it was confidence. If your idol wore it, you believed in it automatically. That's why what happened recently hit so weird. So picture this, I'm scrolling through my feed, minding my own business, and suddenly I see this headline: Nike just lost $27.5 billion in one day. I had to blink like 3 times just because that number doesn't even feel real. The CEO stepped down, investors freaked out, and Nike basically said, yeah, things are not looking great right now. This is the same Nike that hit $170 a share during lockdown in 2021, back when everyone was doing fake home workouts for Instagram stories. Nike was at the top of the world. But the comeback run didn't last. Slowly, quietly, Nike went from being the icon of sports to a company that kind of looks like it needs a motivational speech. Sales dropped 2% last quarter. Next quarter, they're expecting a 10% drop. For a company this big, that's like watching Superman get tired after one staircase. And here's the craziest part. Nike isn't losing to one rival. It's losing to everyone. Hoka, On, New Balance, Adidas, even your dad's weekend shoes are cooking Nike right now. So the question is, how did the biggest brand in sports get outplayed in its own game? Here's where the story starts slipping. Nike's big master plan was simple: cut out the middleman and keep more of the money. In 2017, the company launched its consumer direct push, selling directly to customers through their own stores, websites, and apps. For a while, it worked. The shift added over $12 billion in extra revenue and made Nike look like a tech company wearing a sneaker costume. Nike pulled back from places like Macy's and started shrinking its share at Foot Locker. In 2020, Nike made about 75% of Foot Locker's purchases. By 2022, that number was expected to drop to 60%. Foot Locker flat out said this was because Nike was chasing its direct-to-consumer fantasy. That sounds great in a boardroom, but in the real world, it meant this. You walk into the mall, go to the sneaker wall, and you see less Nike. That cleaner brand image came with a very simple dark effect: less Nike product in front of people who actually buy sneakers. And then came the biggest problem with the dream. Customers still preferred shopping at Foot Locker and Dick's more than digging through Nike's own app. Business Insider pointed out that while Nike was pushing direct sales, people still loved those old school chains. So Nike basically shut down part of its own distribution, assuming customers would follow them to Nike.com. But they didn't. They bought whatever was on the shelf, and the shelf was now full of Hoka, On, New Balance, and Adidas. Meanwhile, the numbers began to tell a very awkward story. In 2022, wholesale still brought in about $25.6 billion, while Nike Direct did about $18.7 billion. By the fourth quarter of 2024, it got worse. Nike Direct revenue fell 8% to $5.1 billion, dragged down by a 10% drop in digital sales, while wholesale revenue rose 5% to $7.1 billion. If the DTC play was the first stumble, this next part is where Nike actually tripped. Nike used Air Max Bubbles, Flyknit, and Zoom X Foam to create shoes that looked like they escaped a lab experiment. But somewhere around 2019, the magic started fading. Instead of new ideas, Nike started running a greatest hits playlist on loop. Jordan 1 in a new color, Dunk in a slightly different black and white, Air Force 1 with a new swoosh. Customers figured it out fast and realized the limited drop wasn't really limited. They learned to wait for discounts because Nike always restocked. When a brand trains its own fans to chill and not buy at full price, that's not a strategy, that's a slow leap. And while Nike kept recycling old hits, the rest of the industry went full science fair. Hoka showed up with running shoes shaped like marshmallows, and runners loved them. On rolled in with weird cloud pods on the bottom, and suddenly every tech bro had a pair. New Balance went from dad's lawn shoes to fashion's hottest thing without breaking a sweat. During 2020 to 2021, Nike could print money just by pressing the restock button on a Panda Dunk. The Jordan 1 was so hot you could basically trade it like a stock, but hype only works when two things stay true. Number 1, scarcity feels real, and number 2, consumers feel excited. By 2024, neither was true. Jordans felt repetitive, collabs stopped feeling special, the hype train didn't just slow down, the wheels fell off. And that opened the door for something even worse: competitors taking over whole categories Nike used to own. First, look at Hoka. In fiscal year 2023, it grew 58.5%, hitting $1.41 billion in revenue. That's a $500 million jump in 1 year alone. Hoka didn't creep up, they sprinted past the spot where Nike used to feel safe. Meanwhile, performance running was up about 7% in the US in the first half of 2025, even as overall athletic footwear dipped 1%. The message? People still want performance, they just don't always want the swoosh. Then there's On. It hit record results and grabbed valuations of $19.6 billion in 2025 as investors piled up. On's cloud tech and premium positioning stole some of Nike's spotlight. While Nike was playing its greatest hits album, On was writing new songs. But don't forget New Balance. Once your dad's sneakers, NB tapped into nostalgia and flipped the script. By late 2024, the brand had strong momentum with Gen Z. If you let youth define identity, you're either in or you're out. And that move came at the worst possible time. Gen Z doesn't worship monolithic brands anymore, micro brands that feel personal. They want Hoka for running, On for textile, and New Balance for fashion. Even Crocs somehow slid into the cultural chat. Nike still feels big, but became the default option instead of the identity builder. The funny thing? Nike's culture used to be built on athletes first. Athletes chose Nike because it helped them win. That's what made the swoosh aspirational. But when Nike drops a campaign today, the connection to sport feels thinner. There are fewer performance stories and fewer moments where the brand feels obsessed with pushing human limits. And people can feel it. Nike's troubles weren't just in malls or on your feed. They were about to hit the biggest stage of all. And when the emotional connection fades at home, it becomes painfully obvious overseas, especially in the region Nike depended on the most. Nike spent years treating China like its cheat code. At one point, China made up over 15% of Nike's global sales, and the company acted like this growth would last forever. As long as China kept buying, Nike could miss in other places and still look like a genius. Then, the bottom fell out. Chinese consumers shifted toward local brands fast. Anta, Li-Ning, and a whole lineup of homegrown companies exploded thanks to Guochao, the national pride trend that basically said, why buy foreign when our stuff is cheaper and also not boring? That's where Nike's old playbook stopped working, because people didn't want a global story anymore. They wanted a local one. At the same time, youth spending dropped and premium pricing stopped making sense. If you can get a pair of Antas that look good and cost half as much, Nike's $150 option starts to feel like a math problem nobody wants to solve. And then geopolitics kicked the door down. US-China tensions made Western brands feel less cool and sometimes less welcome. Nike didn't do anything wrong, it just got hit by forces way bigger than sneakers. As a result, the market Nike relied on the most stopped carrying the load. Sales slowed, growth stalled, and because Nike never built a strong backup engine in places like India or Southeast Asia, there was nowhere else to shift the weight. So what do you think? What will be the future of Nike? Will Nike be dead or simply judged like a normal company? Share your thoughts in the comments and tap like, tap subscribe, do the whole ritual.